the screen that I'm sharing with you right now, which is the learning platform. Last time, quickly, what we discussed is a couple of things. Both Chris's gave you a walkthrough how to set up your account through my profile and how to be ready to go to use the methodology for your first students. From there, what they did, they helped you understand how to conduct the first class. They walked you step by step on how to start the first class, how to add a student, or just select from a current student, and some really awesome and helpful tips and tricks on how actually to conduct the first lesson using one of the lessons from included in the program. I'm not going to go over too many details, but don't forget the Canvas is a very powerful tool. If there's one takeaway from what they shared is the Canvas is a very powerful tool for you to customize the lesson. And also don't forget about the homework. We made it easy for you to send a homework by just clicking here. And right now I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm in a browsing mode. But you should be able with one click to send the homework included in that lesson right here. We ended the conversation with actually the placement test. So what they did was they showed you how to send a placement test and how and why placement test is so important to do and to send before the first lesson. So that's kind of a quick walkthrough of what we did last time and how we managed the conversation. I'm gonna stop sharing right now. Perfect.
And let's start with the following question. Actually, it's more than a challenge now. So everybody, hands on your keyboard, keep your eyes on the chat, and listen carefully to this question. From a teaching perspective, how could you explain the word link?
I will not answer because Victor was quizzing me today and I failed, so I will let somebody else go first. And you can, if you want, you can also talk instead of typing.
Clickable words, connection, I like connection. Connect two or more things. A doorway to another area of a site, yes, to lead the student there. Connection again, that's it. So we're all speaking the same language here. It's to connect the students, to connect the ideas.
Maybe if you go File, New Incognito window, you'll open another tab and then you'll be able to log in as the teacher. There you go. Great. Yeah,
that
sometimes
didn't
it's a
happen in the test. That's odd.
It's okay. Yeah, sometimes when you have like you're logged in as multiple people on the same account, but there you go. You're in the teacher account.
Thank you for that, Chris.
No problem.
Eduardo Miranda. Eduardo Miranda has done his test and he was classified as C1. Okay, so our first class was like this. Eduardo, congratulations, you're a C1 student, but let's take a look. Let's analyze the gaps you have in your understanding of the English language, the results that you had while you were being tested as A1, A2, and then I quickly explained the CEFR, the Common European Frame of Reference, and then I showed him that although he's a C1, which is the highest level, he had some gaps. And for example, in his A1, we have a map now. So that's why it's so important for them to do the placement test, because with that, you have a map, you have a north. So I showed him that in order to close all the gaps, to clarify all his doubts, which some of them were fossilized mistakes. He was never corrected in some basic things like possessive adjectives, difference of using subject and object pronouns. So my class, with showing him all his gaps and making that connection with the lesson. So I always referred back to his test results. And as the classes progressed, we were always closing the gaps in A2, in B1, and then I asked at the end of the class, can you now answer this question? What did you miss? Can you explain to me, from your perspective, what was misunderstood in that question? So this is the link I do. In between classes, I like to do two things. Let me get here. Do you see here the next slide? I always introduce the next slide with this. So you read some questions, you read some sentences. Now let's apply to house topic. Or now let's apply to their house. And now let's have some gap fill exercises. And then I explain how the gap fill exercises are done. So I'm always paying attention to this next slide before pushing forward the next one. Also, when I don't remember exactly which gap fill exercise is the next one, I mouse over, I hover over here, and I see the little snapshot. You guys all can see that they are even with numbers. So I see that my next input slide will be on the practice, a lot of practice. Okay, so it will be here at the 32. So I know that from now to 32, I'll have lots of exercises, so I'll keep linking. So now we're exercising this pronoun. Do you remember in the test, you missed that pronoun? So I'm always linking the activities like that, always using the gap analysis as reference. And then in the end, when I reach the final slide, I like to open the canvas. As you can see, I have taught this class a lot already, because I have all the contents that I used with the other students, and I like to keep this way. And then I come here and ask him, tell me or type below a few things that we learned today in today's class. And I'll use this as the warm-up of my next class, linking the last one with the next one, always using the canvas. And maybe one of these other mistakes that you see here belongs to my future students. So that's why I don't ever clean my canvas. So I always have lots of things to show them. So this is my basic idea of using the tool as much as possible, using all these resources to link as much as possible. And as the student gives me his wrap up, his understanding of the lesson, so when he says, I had difficulty understanding that there can be the plural of it. So while he types his answer, which can be used in the classroom chat, by the way, because the Canvas is only for teachers, but I have asked the support team to maybe allow the Canvas to be used by the students. They said they will try that next year. I asked them to type things here in the classroom chat, which pops up so I can easily see their answers when I'm not browsing the Canvas. So I go back to that slide in which he says he had a doubt, he had a confusion, a first slide mistake, and show to him again. And show to him when I share my screen, sharing is a must here, that he missed that first question because he didn't understand that difference. And now, at the end of this lesson, because we used the tool, because we used all the possibilities in the tool, he's able to answer that. So we are closing all the gaps. And it's a laborious work. We have to go bit by bit. And some classes will be super easy. Some other classes will be very confusing because he'll be battling those first slides mistakes. But I always thought it was that way, Victor. Nobody ever corrected me. Yeah, so let's practice that. Let's have some homework. And then I log into his account and I show him that he has done all these homeworks, that he is able to click on them and go back and review his answers, or that he can have, when we have a quiz with the student, it pops up here by the right side of the join lesson, sometimes when you have games with them. So I'm always connecting things from the beginning to the end. When it's not class number one, I like to start with the last homework, which I usually leave some comments, even if it's all correct. Remember that you have difficulty with this. Now it will had a 100 performance. Not to correct all the time, but also give some appraisal, some compliments to boost his morale. And then I start the next lesson. Sometimes I like to do, when the student is in very low level, I like to overlap lessons. So I go back a few slides. For example, Eduardo has had all these lessons that you see in green. So if I plan to give N5.1, which he's also had, I go back to 4.1, I enroll him in the class, and then I start from only following the input slides, the ones that have information and not practice. So practice, practice. Okay, it's not coming any input slide at the moment, but then I focus only on this one, that he can omit the nouning which he's using. Peter's hair is short, but Patrick's is long. You don't need to repeat the word hair. Remember that from last class. What else do you remember? Do you remember that we had that question in your Canvas? So I access the Canvas again. That's why I never clean it. If I have a different student coming up, I just go to the side or go upwards and I start a new section. I can even name his name here and has like a chapter of my Canvas, because as they said last webinar, Canvas is unlimited and it's a must. It really works well. I usually have some images loaded up already. We don't need many because I learned, and I didn't know that whenever you click here, so if the student has a doubt, I can send him the audio or the image, which automatically opens and saves search the next one. But I used to have lots of images loaded up on my desktop to put it here, previewing some possible questions. So what I would really like to share with you guys is link from one to another. Make them see how they progress based on the gap analysis. Gap analysis for me here, if I could, Victor, can you choose one to be your favorite? It's gap analysis. Even after if I'm with a C1 student, business-oriented guy, he wants more input, he wants new vocabulary all the time, I'll always go back. Remember that you could not say this and that, now you can. So that's one less gap in your English knowledge, and that's how we have to keep using this tool and having more live sessions. But that's it. Open for questions now. Do I have to host you back?
That was a great session. And actually, Victor, would you mind going back to the gap analysis? One, I do want to reiterate, if it's not enough what we've already said, the gap analysis is gold, as Victor said. And you get the gap analysis only if the student completes the placement test. So that's why we actually highly recommend, and we call and we ask you guys to really explain to students, not only send them the placement test and say, hey, here's a placement test, take it. Because I'm a student myself, and I would say, oh, 45 minutes, no way, that takes so long. But if you tell them, hey, Lisa, please complete this placement test before our first lesson, because it will help us really tailor your learning experience and your learning kind of plan, and you'll get gap analysis of where you are within your English and what you're trying to accomplish, and we can have a much better experience together. And if you say that to the student, they will be a lot more convinced and prone to taking the placement test. So please, not only just send the link and hope for the best, but also make sure to encourage your student to take the placement test. And this gap analysis, if you show this gap analysis on the first class, I can guarantee you that the student will see where they are gonna go, and they will be very prone to continue learning with you. Yep.
Yeah, and further to Elitsa's point, and Vitor did a great job of showing us that even with advanced students, it's very common to have ingrained fossilized errors that have been left behind at lower levels. But most of the students that are going to be wanting to learn with you have all been to language institutes. They've all, learned a bit of English at school. The reason they're coming to you on Preply is because they want individual attention. They want someone who's really going to take the time to give them individual attention. Now, the problem is it's very hard to give individual attention to 20 different individual students at all at the same time. Plus, when you get new inquiries for first lessons, very hard to develop an individual plan for each student. That's the idea of the placement test. You send it out and let the student do the work, let the software do the work. 5, 10, 15 minutes before your first lesson, you analyze the results like Vidya was showing us, and then you're ready to give a very individualized approach in that first lesson and really kind of show that student that this isn't just another language institute on a high street somewhere in your town. This isn't like learning English at high school. This isn't like learning English at your university. I'm your one-on-one coach who's taken the time to develop an individual learning plan with you. And we're not just going to jump right into C1 lessons because I have some diagnostic that says you're C1. We're going to actually, first, we're going to start clearing your fossilized errors, which nobody's taken the time to clear in your entire experience of learning English. I think that Vitor really showed is, and Litsa's saying is that's really the powerful tool there, is being able to take an individualized approach at scale, for lack of better words.
Yeah, Chris, great add on there. And Vitor, thank you so much for your tips.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite.
That was great. And one last thing, before we move on to actually how to handle questions from students or requests that they just want to speak or they just want to practice speaking about the placement test. How I've seen other tutors use it is when, let's say, next to the next step, the student already purchases a package, 5 to 10 packages with you. You're already excited. At the end of the 10th class, the last class with that student, what you can do is you can use this gap analysis to walk them through. Let me show you where we started and what all the different things we learned together in these 10 classes, right? Because a lot of times when we talk to students, the reason why they decide not to continue lessons is because they don't feel like they're making progress. They don't feel like that devoting time and resources to studying really helps them get anywhere. So if you even show small progress, this means a lot for the students, and you encourage them to continue forward. So there's a lot of ways to use the gap analysis, and that's why one of my favorite part of the learning program as well. So please make sure whichever way you prefer, use it to its full potential. And now I do want to move to the next point. When I speak with a lot of you, I hear the same question. Okay, Litsa, you provided this amazing learning program, but majority of my students and my new students, they just want to practice speaking. So this is not really relevant to them. They don't really need to take the placement test. And the questions that I always like to ask is, okay, no student just says, I just want to speak. They have a further goal down the line. They want to speak because they want to get along with their in-laws. They want to understand their grandkids better. They want to prepare better to speak more fluently in marketing terms in English. People have a goal that they want to practice and they want to speak because of X, Y, and Z. So for exploring that further will really help you. Also, you still need to understand, okay, you want to practice, but where are you within your English? That's why the test would still work for the students. So please take a step back, and I'm sure that a lot of you do it, but really explore what exactly the student wants to practice, why they want to practice. And then you actually can find a lot of those topics included in the learning program. My favorite part is actually business English. We do have a lot of students that are at a higher level, C1, C2. And for those actually students, this would work really, really, really well. What you can do is, sorry, I have to mute you guys because I don't want to hear background noise. What you can do is, again, a lot of us, students come to you and say, I need to practice for this interview. I have this interview. interview is a process. You can help them create their resume, create the cover letter, practice the interview, prepare for the meetings. There are a wealth of resources for those high-end students with better English that you can use from here. And so I highly advise you, when you have a student who just want to practice, you still have to think about topics that are interesting to them. You still have to think about the relevancy of the conversation. And a lot of actually the content here is more engaging. It's more about the student. It's more about engaging in a conversation between the student and the tutor. So I do want to pause here for a second and see if both either Chris.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'll jump in too. I think Elisa gave a great introduction there, and there's something I would just mention about our lesson library. It is for you. It is designed for you to go discover. Now we're all busy but we've all got a lot going on. So there's two general ways of exploring. There's using the search bar at the top, or as Elisa was showing, there's manually inspecting different elements of the categories. So Elisa already showed us the business English, which is actually on this line here. But I'll give you just a brief understanding of the way things are broken out. Top left, we have the new curriculum, which is step-by-step. It's sequential, very much like a course book. Every lesson leads after the other. They're multi-skill lessons, so each one practices reading, listening, speaking, of course, and a little bit of explicit grammar and vocabulary. These lessons, currently you have the entire sequence for the elementary A2 level. We're adding to this every month. Eventually, you're going to have everything from beginner to advanced. So you could literally just take a student step by step, sequentially. The next category I'll point out up here is these speaking activities. All the lessons in the library are designed for live conversation, video conference, speaking it through. Even the technical lessons that Victor was showing are designed for a grammar-based activity. A speaking activity, but using grammar. The speaking activities, the reason they're called speaking activities is because they're thematically based. So they don't include any explicit grammar. So you can actually see there's a huge category here for students that just want to speak. What you can do is, as Elisa was saying, is figure out their goals and figure out which themes are going to be the most relevant to them. If they're going if they work in data science, for example, privacy and surveillance might be a great speaking activity. And then you just launch the lesson. You're just exploring right now, so you just browse. Oh, sorry, I'm not logged in. But you just browse the lesson to launch it. You just select that I'm just browsing, and you use that to explore the lesson, to decide if it's right for you. That's really all I wanted to say, is that the library is designed for your exploration. There's a huge base there. Speaking activities, reading activities and step-by-step curriculum, business English, for the students that just want to speak. That's where you're going to want to spend a lot of your time.
Yeah, thank you. And one last thing I wanted to add that I just remembered from a lot of the tutors that I speak with shared this tip with me, and I thought that might be actually useful for all of you as well. What they do is usually when students want to speak, they are trying to also improve their pronunciation. And one way to help them really improve their pronunciation, and this is a bit off topic, but I really want to share it because I think you can find it helpful, is ask them to record themselves reading during the first lesson, reading a text, and then ask them to send it to you. afterwards, after the 5th, 6th, 10th class, ask them to record themselves again, and then they can see the whole difference that they have made by pronouncing different words and different phrases. So just helping the students see progress is again extremely beneficial to keep them engaged, to keep them continue, because I am a learner myself. I'm trying to learn a few languages, and I can tell you that learning a language is a marathon. It's not a race. You keep going, and you hope that you've learned something. You hope that you've made progress, but you really need somebody to show you that you have made that progress. So use that tip. Let me know if it works for you as well as it has for others, and love to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, I want to jump in too about the speaking lessons.
Yay, go in, Chris. First time talking, good to see you.
Thank you. So if the concern is my students just want to talk, if you have students that say, hey, I don't really want to do a bunch of grammar, I don't want to do this, I really just want to talk, that's fine. And that's what the speaking lessons are there for. So the speaking lessons do contain lots of great question prompts. However, what happens with language lessons is, even though the student may say they only want to talk, after a few weeks, after maybe a few months, they start to say, gosh, what am I learning in English lessons? I'm paying my tutor and we just talk. And so there will come a point, whether it's in 2 weeks or 2 months, that just talking will cease to cut it with the student. So just talking is wonderful for building rapport, even for making a lesson fun. But part of what makes the off to class lesson so effective is that embedded in the speaking lessons are vocabulary slides, are just things that will, like matching activities to help them learn new words. Because what that does, in addition to the homework, which helps them practice writing and which helps them practice the vocabulary they learned, is that 6 weeks later, they can say, yeah, I'm doing a lot of speaking in my English lessons, but you know what? I'm sure I'm learning a lot of vocabulary. Because I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but as a teacher, I have very often had the experience of a student comes to me. I say, have you had English lessons before? They say, yes. I say, why aren't you still with your last teacher? And they say, all we did was talk. The improvement, the measured progress isn't clear. So even if your student says they just want to talk, and even if that's what they really want, your student at a certain point is not going to be able to justify continuing to have lessons with you if they don't know they're improving. So one great thing that I do is, once I've had a student for a while, every 8, 9, 10 lessons or so, I will go back into their lesson history. I'll look at some of the lessons we've done like 8, 9, 10 weeks ago. So kind of like not really fresh in the memory bank. And I'll go over the homework activity with them. Even though they may have done it 2 months ago, they may or may not remember. So I'll do the homework, I'll go over the homework with them again. And that's a way where you can take it from, oh, we're just having fun, interesting English lessons, and it's easy breezy, which is fine and good because you want to keep your students interested, but that's got to be balanced with, for my student to continue, they've got to know my teacher knows what my goals are, my teacher has a plan to help me reach my goals, and my teacher is making sure that I'm learning as I go. If you have a lesson that's all that, it'll be boring too quickly, right? No speaking lessons, grammar every week, it'll get bored, and your student will say, gosh, this is a chore, and I don't want to do it. I want to go to the movies tonight. I don't want to have an English lesson. But if it's too much of the other, then your student can say, this is just happy fun time, and what am I really getting out of this? If you want to be a really effective English teacher and have your students for a longer period of time than just a handful of lessons, you've got to find a way to balance that, and every student is going to be different. And that's part of your work as a teacher, to say, you know your student, and now you have the resources. So what is the way that I can balance these resources in the way that's going to be most effective given this student's personality, given their learning style, and given their goals?
Great. Thank you very much, Chris, for that. And I think that we are about 40 minutes in. I will quickly sum up everything we've discussed so far, and I think we want to open it up for questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to do that last time, so we're trying to compensate. So if you want to ask, please, I will unmute everyone and you can ask your questions. But as a quick summary, what we did in these 2 webinars was really giving you a very high-level walkthrough the learning platform, how to set up your account and link it to the Zoom account. Don't forget that Zoom is used just to see and hear the student. They will already, once you invite them to the learning platform, they will already see your the class materials. So you learn how to do that. From there, you learn how to conduct the class. And we shared with you some tips and tricks with using the Canvas, using the dictionary and the pronunciation, the images, using even the Canvas as a whiteboard, and sending the homework. And lastly, we ended up with the placement test and how to send the placement test, how to enroll the student, in the gap analysis. And if there are 2 takeaways from today's class, today's webinar, it is first that gap analysis is gold. That is the most, I think, the most valuable part of the learning platform, because it does the work for you. It assesses the student and provides your learning plan. So please, there is no reason why you should not send the placement test, even just the grammar part, to any new student you have on the platform. And the second is, again, that speaking, you have to have a plan for those students that just want to speak. I think we already discussed that in a very high level in details. But that's kind of the many takeaways that you have from these 2 webinars. I hope you found them helpful, and we will send you the recordings. Once we cut them in the beginning and we make them look good, we'll send them to you, so you'll have them, you can go back to them. We will send you both the teaching guide that we have shared with you, where you can have it open before the first class or the second you get a student, and the how-to guide, which literally contains all the information we shared with you on how to set up your account to actually how to engage students going forward. So we will send all of that to you, but I don't want to take on more time, and I do want to open it up to you. So please feel free to voice your questions, so we have time to go over 10 questions, if not more. And if there's something that we have missed, please let us know so we can go over it right now. Anyone?
I seem to have a problem with students being able to access Zoom.
Okay, would you mind elaborating a bit more on what is the problem? When
I log into the classroom and I sit there waiting for them, often nothing happens.
Okay.
And they don't join, so I have to go down another route.
Okay, in that case, what that's signifying is they actually haven't, it's not a Zoom issue. And once they do that, if you've enrolled them in a lesson, they see a big green button. I've translated the interface into Spanish, but they would see a big green button that says join lesson.
But are the instructions that they're getting clear enough for them to understand? Because it's not just once that it happens with me, it's consistently.
Yeah, so what that means is your job is to make sure that they understand at the time of your lesson, you press this link and you use this email and this password to log in. Once you do that, you're good. You're going to see a huge button that says join lesson. So it's important on the first lesson to just over communicate, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but then after the first lesson, everything's cool. They know exactly that at the time of my lesson, I go to this domain and I enter my email and my password, and then I go into the tool. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Thank you.
And another point is to make sure, if you don't see that purple button in the classroom chat, what that means is that you actually have not connected your Zoom account with the learning program. So, so make sure that you connect first, which is the very first step in our first webinar. And then from there, make sure that the student has received the link, as Chris mentioned. So you have to have a communication chat, probably on Preply's chat, so you can communicate that with them. Anybody else that?
Elitza, do you want to address the question someone asked, can we use Preply Space on Off to Class?
Sure, absolutely. Unfortunately, at the moment, we cannot use Preply Space. And it is really important that you understand this, because Zoom embeds, once you actually embed your link, Zoom link to the learning program, you don't need to do anything else. All the classes will happen automatically on Zoom. So the learning platform, the Preply Space, you unfortunately cannot use, because you have to then share your screen, and it will be a lot harder for you to communicate. So again, if that's, if everything else fails, of course you have to have plan B, but you have to actually use in Zoom with the learning platform. If you really cannot figure out any other option, then you can go ahead and use other channels.
There is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can ask. No problem. You can ask. I will wait.
Okay, thank you. Can the student access the Canvas after the lesson?
Great question. Yes, your Canvas automatically gets included as the last slide of the lesson summary. So unless by default, you have the ability of marking a Canvas private if you don't want to do that. But by default, as long as the Canvas isn't marked as private, that gets included as the last slide of the lesson summary.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Sorry, I just want to add to that question. Is it editable, the Canvas, for the student? Can they edit?
No. So